So I wouldn't say that that the interest in any kind of children's literature has faded in any way.
I agree with what Mr. Bond said. I just want to uh, break away from this for 1 second to tell the students of La Martiniere for Girls specially that all the teachers who you love, fear, respect, and adore, 15 minutes ago when Mr. Bond came in, it was like a Justin Bieber concert backstage situation, right? So just keep that in mind the next time you're in class. Yeah. Now coming back swiftly to Harry Potter and so on. Um, See, I think the Harry Potter phenomenon is something that changed global pop culture forever, not just children's publishing. But I remember that in the prehistoric times of 2002 or 3, when I was just coming into publishing, and I was talking to, and I mean, I was writing books that weren't specifically for children at that point of time, but I knew that at some point of time I wanted to write for children, and I asked children's publishers, what are what do Indian children like reading? Because I had never thought of myself while reading as an Indian child because I was reading books from everywhere around the world. So they said, "Are you going to write the Ramayana?" I said, "No." Then they said, "Are you Ruskin Bond?" I said, "No, I wish I was, but I'm not." Then said, "Then don't write for children." Because it's not a question of are there people in India who love books, who love writing for children, who kind of get what good children's writing is. It's just that there isn't a wider mechanism through which people can become aware that these books exist under the onslaught of both fantastic books from the West and people are very scared in India to sell books that aren't the Ramayana and the Mahabharata or Mr. Bond's work. And Mr. Bond has built this mountain of work on his own over a period of time. Right. So that's the basic challenge. I think we have all kinds of books coming out. There are wonderful children's publishers. There are wonderful editors. There are wonderful readers. If there's any discrepancy, really, it's just that the readers don't know that good books exist.
So Rahul, is film a media to communicate some of this? Because I think what happens is the visual quality seems to appeal more to the younger generation. But again, in the film world, we're not seeing as many children's films being made in India particularly. What's your take? You've acted in one, a hugely popular one as well. So,
Well, actually, I think we need to backtrack a little bit. I think the fundamental reason why children's books and children's films are not anywhere near the industry, if I can use that word, that it should be, is because we don't respect our children. As a society, we believe that adults are more important than children. It's hierarchical, call it feudal, patriarchal. There's no doubt about the fact that in India, children are meant to be heard occasionally. Nowadays, they're getting a little irksome because they're speaking up much louder. But if you give them an iPad, they'll be quiet for a while. Children are not accorded the same status as adults in this country, which is why the state of children's fiction, the state of children's movies, because they're somehow looked at as, the serious stuff is what I'm doing here, and this is make a children's film, take care, Children's Film Society will make a film. But the truth is, if only that attitude changes, everything else will change. The fact that children are, as far as I'm concerned, I always spoke to my niece like an adult. I never thought of her as a child. Kaisi ho beti? Kya kar rahi ho? Acha acha, biscuit khaoge? Nobody deserves to be spoken to like that. So similarly, I think the reason why Mr. Bond's stories are popular and Samit's mad imagination is so infectious is because they don't treat kids like kids. They actually look upon imagination as belonging to anybody. A sense of wonder can belong to anybody. And I think that while Harry Potter, as Samit said, might have changed the paradigm, there have been hugely popular children's books and films in the past, but not in India, except in Bengal. Except in Bengal, I was thinking about this 2 days ago, and I said, here, there has been a culture, especially in your literature, where children are respected. And there's interesting, meaty stuff. I've done the whole, I've done 2 Feluda radio plays, and I've read the entire collection, as an example. So, If we don't get out of that mindset, we're not going to be able to speak to producers or publishers to convince them that, look, they have to be convinced that this is a solid market. The truth is, it is a massive, possibly the largest captive market in the world today is the children's market in India. We're talking incredibly huge numbers. So, directly to your question, Seema, as to why films aren't made, that is the fundamental reason. There is a kind of a theek hai, when you've made lots of money and you're very successful, make a children's film. So what we need to do is first we need to understand the universe a child inhabits. You cannot beat, when it comes to cinema, you cannot beat what's being done technologically in children's cinema elsewhere in the world, especially in the West. So how are you going to beat them? For 3 or 4 crores or 5 crores, how are you going to make a children's film that will stun everybody? It has to be imaginative. It has to be, Samit, like your stuff between covers, where the imagination of the child is putting in $25 million. Because she is seeing something that he's describing that is just impossible to reproduce. So the challenge, therefore, is to tell a great, inventive, crazy, mad, full of hooks kind of story where the children are contributing to the story all the time. Where you're not showing what they're supposed to see, and so their imaginations are working hyperactively. That, I think, is the way to go. But the only way we're going to get there is if we're going to convince, it's the chicken and egg syndrome, convince, I will never use that word again, is clearly that's not a word that's allowed here. If we can impress upon the entire industry, my industry, that there's massive amounts of money to be made from here. Because 90% of people in my industry treat it like a business and not like art. Fair enough. So you can, if you can put those numbers in front. But the way to break this, the way to splinter this chicken and egg syndrome is to actually first make a movie within a sensible children's film budget, but actually then explode the market open with the quality of the story that's being told.
So you mentioned about respect for children, Rahul, and passing on, giving them an iPad or giving them something to distract them so that they're neither seen nor heard. Mr. Bond, what's your take on that? Is that one of the reasons why you think the reading habit is dying, if at all it is dying in children today?
No, it isn't dying. If I look back on my own school days, when I went to a good school where we had a good library, but in a class of 35 boys, there were just 2 or 3 of us who were fond of reading, who were fond of books. Everyone else had to take a book off the library shelf, and it was always put back at the end of the week without being read. So, and in those days, and I'm going back to the 1950s, there was no television, there was no internet, there were no video games, there were none of the things that we blame today. But reading was a minority habit, a minority pastime then and as it is now. But today, even if 2 out of 35 are reading, in terms of actual numbers, because of the fact that there are now hundreds of thousands of children who can read, because of the spread of education in English, in Bengali and other languages. So that very small minority goes into hundreds of thousands. So as Rahul says, that's only the beginning. That's just the edge of it. Because if a few more of them read, and if good books and films were provided for them, that minority would soon become a majority. So the potential is different, and I just hope I can live a few years longer to benefit from it, because for the last 30 years I've been struggling to look for readers.
So,
sorry, Seema, I think we are off message here. We're not discussing whether reading is dying. It certainly isn't dying. We're discussing where is the Harry Potter moment for Indian literature. And that's what I was talking about. I never made a case to say that reading is dying. I'm saying reading is growing, but my God, it can be mad, exponential, crazy, and take over this nation.
Absolutely.
The way it has in other cultures, both in film and literature, and that hasn't yet happened. And I believe that's because we've relegated children to be one slice of the target audience, so to speak.
Fair enough. Thank you. Samit, you have something to say?
No, also, I think Harry Potter started publishing in 97, 96, something like that. It became the global beast it is in 2003, 2004, when the films started getting traction, when the fourth book was coming out. So there is a certain momentum that needs to be built in all these things, and that's exactly, I think, what Rahul was talking about earlier. Whereas, so it's not like people read J.K. Rowling's books, realized this is going to change the world, and immediately set about pouring billions of dollars into it. It required a certain number of years of children really liking those books, and adults. And until you reached a point where someone in some film office said, we can make this happen. And I think Rahul was spot on when he talked about the attitudinal difference between the way people see children's films and adult films. Because I've spoken to producers, and I have to say that when you're seeing Mr. Rahul Bose sitting here being erudite and articulate, that's not how most of the film industry is, right? And I've pitched children's movies, and after sort of 5 minutes of glazed looking, they said, "हाँ, but hero कौन है?" And the hero's a child. And that's just not going to work. So there's going to be at some point. I mean, Mr. Bond has had books of his being made into films, but they've not been seen as, you know, the children's mainstream films. They just in India there just has to be one. Then suddenly the next year there'll be 100, and we'll be fatigued of them, right? But that moment will come. And also, yeah, reading is not dying. Reading is strong. Reading is alive. In fact, I would say more children read now than they did 10 years ago. I don't know about before that. I also went to a school which was, a good school. Even there in a class of 40, 45 people, about 2 or 3 people who read. The rest of them went to the library, picked out thrillers, read the heavily underlined sections, and they were done. Um, but yeah, it's all good, and it's going to get better. It could be much better. I mean, people give me iPads and iPhones to shut me up, you know. So that's not the problem.
Um, so Rahul, we said that there has to be a body, or there has to be people who in the film world who must appreciate and sort of spread this, make that one children's movie not just in a 1 crore budget because they think it's probably okay, let me do this as well. So how does the children's film board come into? We have one in the country. What is their responsibility? How can they make a difference?
I was just I had a 2-hour chat with the CEO of the CFSI, the Children's Film Society of India. Before I go there, especially amongst the boys, I don't know about the girls, how many of you have seen Chain Kuli Ki Main Kuli? Wait, just watch this, Samit. How many of you have seen it 2 times? How many of you have seen it 3 times? How many of you have seen it 4 times? Now the hands will start going down. Thank you. Here's my point. How many children's films can we think of in the last 20 years? Literally. Stanley Ka Dabba? No, it's not the hand thing. Chain Kuli Ki Main Kuli, anything else? Hawa Hawaii. Okay. Tare Zameen Par is a children's film made for children. It's about a child, but it tackles some very adult. It just tackles some very textured themes. So here's how I started my discussion with the people from the CFSI. Because I said that, look, it's clear that if a child is watching a film 4 times, that there's not enough product, and the child goes back to it, partly because the film might have some hook in it, but definitely mostly because there's nothing else to watch. Correct? If there was something viable, I said, so just imagine those numbers. Now, Chain Kuli Ki Main Kuli was released when the summer holidays finished.